It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day and a great show coming up. Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, joins me here in just a few minutes to talk Vikings. What else would we talk about right now? We are right smack dab in the middle of free agent season. Kirk Cousins, the subject of our conversation. Of course, he is going to Atlanta. You already knew that. He can officially sign today, by the way. That 2-day negotiation period ends. They can actually sign their players now. That $180 million, $100 million guaranteed deal that he got to go to the Falcons. Chip and I will break all that down. Talk about what we think of it, talk about what we think that means for the future, and talk about Kirk Cousins' legacy in Minnesota with one important question that I wanted to get out there. If Kirk Cousins and the Vikings could do it all over again, go back 6 years, would they sign up for this all over again? Would they have signed up for the 6 years of Kirk Cousins in Minnesota again, both Kirk and the Vikings? Chip and I will talk about that, like I said, in just a little bit. Have another big Vikings free agency piece of news to get to at the end of the show. Happened after Chip and I talked. We talked yesterday afternoon, but this happened later in the day. And interesting bit of basketball history that I'll get to at the end of the show as well. First, though, what I miss. Wolves and Wild played last night, and both the games were important. So I want to talk about both those right at the jump. Not a complicated opening segment here today. Wolves rally from 22 points down to beat the Clippers by 18. Their biggest comeback in like 12 years comes against a very good team, a team they're battling in the Western Conference, kind of jockeying for position at the top of the conference. They win the season series now 3-1 against the Clippers, which is also important for any kind of tie-breaking implications. So the Wolves win 118-100 after trailing by 22. Now, what's interesting to me is I want to frame it like this. The Wolves, when they were trailing big early, and I was kind of keeping tabs on the game, it was late, of course, because it's a West Coast game. That was a road game. Trailing early, and I've seen multiple people on social media saying, well, the bad game for the Karl-Anthony Towns haters. You got this team, they've lost 2 in a row already. They got that game, they had that game in Cleveland on this road trip where they lost late. The free throw discrepancy, Rudy Gobert getting teed up, the money sign, things like that. Things started to get negative at that point. They lose that game. They come out to LA. They lose to the Lakers. They look shorthanded, looking like they're not going to be able to withstand and maintain their position without Karl-Anthony Towns. Towns, of course, out for 4 weeks at least. Now, interestingly, just a little side note on that. When the Wolves announced that Towns had torn his meniscus and was going to have surgery, they announced that on Thursday last week, and they announced that he was going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. I was like, okay. I took that to mean 4 weeks from the time they made that announcement, but yesterday they announced that he had successful surgery for the torn meniscus and that he'd be reevaluated in 4 weeks. So I guess we're starting the 4 weeks right now, not 5 days ago. That matters to me, especially when we're talking about, 4 weeks from now is very close to the end of the regular season. We're talking about, can he get back for the postseason? Can he play in the playoffs? Things like that. So keep that in mind. That's 5 days that I thought that the clock was already ticking, and they've now reset those 4 weeks. Anyway, yesterday's game, obviously they don't have Towns in that game, so it's become for some people a referendum on how are they going to play the rest of the year. Towns obviously has been mentioned as a trade candidate. I've mentioned it a bunch of times. Then they have this great year, and you're like, okay, can they keep everybody together? Things like that. Towns is polarizing to a certain degree. I think he's pulled way more people into his orbit this season with the way he's played. He was an all-star. He's really thriving now in kind of that more of a secondary role. He can still be a primary scorer, but this is clearly Anthony Edwards' team. He's thrived in that role. He's, given Rudy Gobert the space he needs. He's really kind of assimilated himself into what the Wolves are trying to do. So there's still this narrative, though, that, that it's this person's team, it's that person's team. How is this going to go? So Wolves are down 22, and people are saying, well, it's a bad game for the Towns haters. They've already lost 2 in a row. This is an important game. So now that they won by 18, does that mean this was a good game for the Towns haters? No. What they're doing right now is trying to withstand. There are far fewer Karl-Anthony Towns haters than ever before. That right now, each individual game is not a referendum on whether or not they're better off with Karl-Anthony Towns. They're obviously better on the court right now with Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, they do have players that can help them withstand that. Naz Reid, he can help them withstand that. They got massive efforts on Tuesday night from Ant, of course, but also Nickeil Alexander-Walker was huge in this game. I think he had 28. Mike Conley Jr. was raining threes. Like, they were making a lot of their shots. That will take away a lot of the sting of losing one of your best players. So my big picture takeaway is this. This is not a referendum. None of the rest of this season is a referendum on whether or not they are better off or worse off with or without Karl-Anthony Towns. We know that. This is about trying to get to the playoffs, still trying to maintain that seed. Mike Conley Jr. called this probably the most important game they've played so far this year. They're up 3 games now on the Clippers. They're just a half game behind Oklahoma City and Denver atop the West standings. And to me, it doesn't matter that much if they finish 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. Don't necessarily want to finish 4 because then you're kind of in that 4 or 5. You're not going to have, you don't really know who your opponent's going to be. But even that's not the end of the world. You just got to start. You got to play better and feel good about how you're playing with or without Towns because you just don't know what his future is going to be for the postseason at least, and how fast he might come back from this meniscus injury. So that's my takeaway from this. This was an important game. This was an important win, especially for seeding. You're still looking at the West, and all those playoff first round series will be hard. So I don't think you're trying to match up or trying to figure out who you could play. Anything is going to be daunting once you get there, but you want to be playing well. You want to be feeling good about how you're playing. They had to feel good from about midway through the second quarter on to be able to beat one of the best teams in the West on their home court, blowing them out eventually after being down by 22. The Wild, meanwhile, got a nice 4-1 win over the Coyotes. Still trailing. It was the bad news in this was it looked like they might stick 4 points behind Vegas. Vegas was losing in the third period last night. They were down by a goal, but they rallied. They tied and then won in overtime. Vegas got 2 points. So Vegas still up 6 with time running out. It's just a shame because the Wild are starting to play a better brand of hockey in general. They might be playing, they might have kind of found a gear, and a lot of times when you say they've found their gear, it's because of Kirill Kaprizov. He had 2 goals on Tuesday. Head coach John Hines, here's what he said about Kaprizov's recent stretch of dominance.
He's playing with hard skill. He's been very, he's hard on pucks. He's getting himself in offensive situations. I think he's playing a great two-way game. He's just playing a real strong, solid style of hockey game, and he's an elite talent. So when you combine those things together, you're going to get the type of production. But he's a game changer, and he's been able to be that for a lot of time, as you said. But the consistency in his game has been pretty impressive.
And listen, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but, their playoff probability is sitting down there at 10 or 15%. But they got a couple games against the Ducks coming up. The Ducks are not good. They got a game against the Blues. They could stack up some points if they're on their game. Maybe at least put some pressure on those teams above them. They've really no margin for error right now with this team. They've afforded themselves no margin for error. They only have 16 games left this season. Can't give away many points at all, but they're at least playing right now. They got Kaprizov going right now in a way that makes you think, hey, they have a chance to win every game. They've been stacking up some wins lately. Not totally out of this thing yet, especially when your best player is playing the way he is right now.
MGM Wine & Spirits is the choice for savings, service, and a great selection of spirits, pre-mixed cocktails, wines, and of course, ice-cold beers and hard seltzers. With over 30 locations throughout the Twin Cities and beyond, there's an MGM near you. Head to MGMWineandSpirits.com to find a convenient location in your area. Get social. Follow MGM on Facebook and Instagram for all the latest news and trends. Make great moments with MGM Wine & Spirits, your locally owned and operated choice for over 50 years. Save time, save money. Shop MGM.
I've got Star Tribune columnist Chip Scoggins with me today, one of about 72 people who's been writing about Kirk Cousins in the last 48 hours, Chip?
It's been is whirlwind? Is that the right word for what
I used that on Tuesday. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind 24 hours with all the stuff they did.
It feels like a blur at this point, right?
Yeah.
We knew this was going to happen, right? We knew it was going to be a kind of a eventful start to free agency, whether Cousins came back or didn't.
Right.
Just you knew they had to make moves, and obviously with the Cousins moving on, that accelerated the whirlwind.
It did. And to kind of put, a lot of what happens when big things like this happen is we quick, like, what's the next thing? We move forward. Let's hit pause for just a minute. Kirk Cousins was here for 6 years, came here on a fully guaranteed, $84 million contract in 2018. How, I was kind of trying to think about his legacy before we started recording. And one question that came to my mind that I think will help us answer some legacy questions is this. If you were Kirk Cousins and if you were the Vikings, would you do this all over again?
Yeah, I think on both, I would say yes. Kirk Cousins made $185 million.
But he hasn't won. He hasn't won. Like, that matters to players.
It matters, but a lot of that is in your control. A lot of that is circumstances. NFL, you can't determine injuries. You can't determine how good the roster is. So some of that, you pick where you think you can win, and then you just do the best you can. And I would say his legacy is complicated.
Yeah.
Don't pardon me if I ramble here, but because it is complicated, and he was a polarizing athlete, probably the most polarizing athlete in my 24 years in Minnesota, for a number of factors. But if you boil it down to me, they were coming off an NFC Championship game.
Yes.
They felt like they were a quarterback away. They didn't have faith that Case Keenum could duplicate or replicate what he did that year, that kind of magic carpet ride. And so they felt like they went out and got the guy who was going to make them a contender year after year, right? That window. You felt like Zimmer's defense was going to be always good. You felt like they were just missing a quarterback. Cousins had good moments. He had good stretches. I would say he had good seasons, but never great. It didn't fulfill what they thought they were going to be able to get. And I don't know how you can look at that. 2 playoff appearances and only 1 playoff win in 6 years and say that it was. Now, that's not all entirely his fault. And the Kirk detractors or critics would say he's judged on that. Yes, quarterbacks are judged on that, but there's a lot of factors that go in there. But he's not blameless either, right? He's not.
Of course not. Yeah.
He has to shoulder a lot of the blame too. So, but it felt like we had several different versions of Kirk. We had the robotic Kirk that we didn't know very well under Zim because they had a frosty relationship, and I never felt like he felt comfortable to come out and kind of show his personality under Zim because that's not really what Zim wanted. And then when Kevin O'Connell got here, I think we got the affable Kirk. I think he played better because of that, because he had a coach, an offensive-minded coach who catered the offense to him. I think he felt more comfortable in his own skin and showing his personality and being the goofy Kirk. So we saw that side of him. I think ultimately fans will look at him as a good quarterback who had some great stretches, is a really good guy. Someone that's likable in terms of family and his approach and all those things. But I don't know that anyone had any real confidence that he was going to lead this team to a Super Bowl and win it.
Well, that's the thing, because he was brought in at a time where they thought they were, like you said, a quarterback away. So, I do wonder, hindsight being what it is, bringing Cousins in at the time they did made all the sense in the world, right? Like, he has the ability to stabilize the position. But as you thought about it more, you're like, well, this didn't really fit the identity that they had built under Zimmer, which was defense first, kind of game manager, quarterback that could, make enough plays, but the defense was going to win the games. And bringing him in did cost them some flexibility at a certain point. Now, the defense started to age out. Guys got older, so there was natural defensive letdown. But, still, the defense was really good in 2018, 2019. Was still okay in 2020 for a lot of those stretches until they had a lot of injuries. But, it didn't make a ton of... As you thought about it in retrospect, it at least didn't fit their identity at the time. It changed their identity and ultimately got Zimmer and Spielman fired.
Well, that's it. It didn't... the idea of it made sense.
Yes.
But when you paired him with what Zimmer, the way he wants to be a run first, ball control, run defense, that didn't make sense. But it was interesting when you think about it. It's like, I don't think Zimmer had a whole lot of confidence in Case Keenum being able to do what he did.
No,
How
he
many
didn't.
times do we hear the horseshoe comment from Zim?
Right.
That they felt like some of that 17 season was luck. So there wasn't a whole lot of confidence there. Clearly, him and Cousins were not a good match personality-wise. And
no, and he didn't like what he symbolized. He symbolized, you're taking this away from me, from the defense, and giving it to the offense.
So then you're thinking, well, what quarterback do you want? I guess Teddy Bridgewater.
Teddy. He wanted Teddy. He wanted Teddy. Even after the injury, I think he wanted Teddy.
Yeah, and so it was a bad marriage there, but I still think the idea of go out and try to get the best quarterback available to pair with a defense and a nucleus of defensive players that were really good in their prime, right? When you're talking about Barr and Kendricks and Danielle and Harrison Smith, and that defense was built to win. So I think you still do it because you take your shot. I mean, I always like when teams take their shot. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And we can always look back and say, well, I should have done it. I like in the moment you take your shot. And if it doesn't work out, then you live with it, but at least you tried.
I would have liked two things in retrospect. One, I would have liked a little bit more settled focus in 2018. Didn't quite seem like they knew what they wanted to do. They brought in DiFilippo. That just wasn't the right thing for Zimmer. Yeah. Like that year, they had the talent. They had all the talent in the world. They should have at least made the playoffs that year. I would have wanted a different approach in 2018 because they came right back in 2019. They won 10 games, made the playoffs, won a playoff game. Like that was their most successful overall season. So you knew they had it in them in 2018. I also would have liked to know what it would have been like for Cousins to play 6 years in his prime, or, more or less his prime for Kevin O'Connell, and not 4 for Zimmer and 2 for O'Connell. Because I think he might have had a different Cousins experience. He might be remembered differently here. Because I think a lot of what happened along the way was people resented the money he was making, resented how much, Zimmer didn't like him. They picked up on that, and it became part of the story of Kirk Cousins.
Well, it was. I don't want to say they were wasted years, but they were weird years because
weird years, yeah.
We just never really. I don't think he ever felt comfortable with showing who he was, personality, playing the way he wanted to play, or just what Zimmer wanted. Right?
No.
I mean, it was just.
Well,
it was.
Remember the weird scene with him, like them shoving each other against Detroit?
Yeah, it was. It was. It just felt like he was held back's not the right word, but just bottled up. Like
he was miscast. He was just miscast.
He just didn't know how to go about leading this team. And so you saw that in the last couple of years. And when he got hurt, he was playing at a really high level. I mean, there were stretches where he played, really, really good football. But there's also the moment, and he won a road playoff game and largest comeback in NFL history, but then we also have those moments where in a playoff game he checked down and the worst, so there's always that. But I just, the more you watch them in this, under this regime and with everything else surrounding him, I just don't know how you could feel confidence that because of what his salary was and all the other issues that this was going to be any more than a fringe playoff team that might get in there, but really wasn't going to do damage in the playoffs. And then when you see what Atlanta offered, I think it's an easy decision. Then I mean, if you're Kwesi and the Wilfs and Kevin O'Connell, you say, thanks for all you've done here, but we're going a different direction. $100 million guaranteed over basically 2 years. You got to move on when you see that.
Yeah, they made the decision easy for him. I think they were inching that way anyway, but once they saw what the offer was, I mean, maybe Atlanta saved Minnesota from itself to a certain degree. Like I felt like the time had come, no matter what. But I think they were still like, maybe we're like, if we can get him on our terms and our price, then maybe it's worth kind of like having him try to build this bridge to the future. It's never felt like it was going to work out. So it was like Atlanta coming in strong was like, okay, if this was the best course of action, no matter what, they just made it easy on him to say, okay, well, that there's no fuss anymore. It's not.
Well, it's true, and I don't know what their final or best offer was, but
no, it certainly wasn't.
It wasn't that.
What Atlanta did.
And maybe they were banking on, hey, he has a really close relationship with O'Connell, and he likes throwing to Justin Jefferson, and they liked where they live, and they like Minnesota and all that. But nothing in Cousins' career has showed us that he was going to take a hometown discount, because hometown discounts it's a nice term. It doesn't work in the NFL. No. Players don't take hometown discounts. They try to get as much as they can to maximize their value before their career comes to end, because you know what? A year from now, that team's going to come to you and say, take a pay cut or you're out of the league, so that happens all the time. So, that whole fairy tale of, oh, he loves it here and he's going to, no, that was never going to be an option.
So we both like the decision. You wrote about that. You said, good job, Kwesi. You saw the money. Then you wrote about, kind of here's what's next. And I think you're right. This is O'Connell's got to identify who he wants, and Kwesi, within reason, has to go get that guy. Now, it's like, obviously, they're not going to go get Caleb Williams. They're not going to get the number one pick from the Bears, but they need to at least, if the guy they want is someone up in that 2-3 spot, like Drake May or Jaden Daniels, they need to explore at least what it takes to get there. The more realistic target probably is J.J. McCarthy, just kind of knowing that there's 3 quarterback needy teams at the top of a 3 high-profile quarterback draft. McCarthy's kind of that next one. We don't know exactly how they think about him, but we do know enough that it seems like they like him. So if that's their guy, they've got to go target him. But I feel like this shifts some of the pressure to O'Connell now.
100%. I mean, now it's O'Connell's ball game, right? Because this is, when they hired him, it was not the entire reason, but I think a substantial part of the thinking was, this is a guy who played the position in the NFL. He's coached quarterbacks. He knows quarterbacks. He studies quarterbacks. They have to figure out this, franchise quarterback, which has haunted them for decades, being able to figure out that conundrum. And so you're not going to rely on Kwesi to tell you which quarterback to pick. No. You're going to rely on the guy this is his expertise. And so I'm sure there'll be obviously input, but O'Connell knows what he's looking for, what fits his system. I'm sure he has in his mind, like, this is the kind of quarterback I want that would excel in our system. And so this is all on him now. The second part of that is, once they identify that person, or 2 people, he might fall in love with 2 or 3. It's on Kwesi to figure out, okay, now how do we make that work? I don't think, Caleb Williams, the Bears are not trading the number 1 pick.
Absolutely not. No.
I don't think Washington's going to pass a chance to get Jaden Daniels.
Why would they? I mean, they need a quarterback. It's the cheat code. You get the cheap young rookie, and you hope you hit the lottery. And those guys at the top tend to work out more than the rest of those guys.
And is New England going to take Drake May? They need a quarterback. I guess if I was, if you told me to put money on it, I'd say yes right now.
They just signed a bridge quarterback, which makes you think they're kind of doing the same thing the Vikings are doing, right?
Exactly. So that, then you look at J.J. McCarthy. I don't think you can sit at 11 and hope that he falls to 11. I think that'd be too dangerous. I think they're going to have to move up. I saw a couple mock drafts today, had him moving up to number 5 with the Chargers. That's for Kwesi and him to figure out. I mean, there's so much smoke screens and subterfuge that goes on now, who's coming up, that you can't believe everything, but you also can't assume that a guy is going to be there at 11. So I think they're going to have to move up if McCarthy's the guy that they like. I wrote about this in the column. I covered the Gopher Michigan game in early October, and normally there's most games. There might be a Vikings representative there. There might be one, most games. There were 4 there this time, and it was Kwesi, Ryan Grigson, Ryan Monens. I mean, their top personnel people were there. Now, Michigan has a ton of guys that are going to get drafted, so they're the best team. So,
easy opportunity to see a bunch of Michigan players. Yes,
a bunch of guys that are getting drafted. But it wasn't hard to connect dots too and say they probably want to all be there to see McCarthy play. So I'm sure they'll do exhaustive research on all these quarterbacks just in case somebody falls or if they fall in love and they're going to have to move up. But it'll be interesting to see if Kwesi, really puts together a package to try to move up. I mean, it would take multiple first-round picks to try to get up into one of those top 3 guys, I think. And so
yes, it would.
Do you love that person that much more than J.J. McCarthy? Maybe they'll say yes and worth it. And I don't know if it'll work out if a team would take that, but I think clearly at this point you've got to be aggressive in that, in that first round and find your quarterback.
Now, the team they're probably going to find themselves battling the most, I would think, in a move-up situation is Denver. I mean, Denver needs
Yeah.
a quarterback. They have the number 12 pick, so they don't quite have as much initial capital. Vikings are at 11, and it's kind of funny to think about how if the Vikings had lost to the Broncos this year, they would be picking
I
behind the
know.
Broncos, and they might have to do a little bit more. But Russell Wilson leads a comeback, then gets dumped. They'd rather pay him $39 million not to play for them, or
Yeah.
probably 38 now that he took the veteran minimum in Pittsburgh. So they need a quarterback. Atlanta at number 8 doesn't seem
They're
like
not
they would
doing
be.
that.
They're not going to
No.
draft a quarterback. They've taken care of
No.
that. You don't draft someone that high and then have them sit for 2 or 3 years, which is what Cousins will
No.
be there for. So you look at anybody else who needs a quarterback in the top, like you got to get to a certain point where you're sure that nobody else is going to take a quarterback. Arizona at 4, they're kind of locked in
No.
on Kyler
Yeah.
Murray. The Chargers at 5 obviously have Justin Herbert. 6, I can't remember who's at 6 right now, but
I
that
don't have
feels
it off
like
the top of my head.
that's probably where you got to get to 5 to make sure you're higher than anybody else who's going to take a
That's
quarterback.
and that's why I think those mock drafts have him. 6 must be somebody who could be in that, in that space. But I think that's why I saw 2 from 2 different outlets that had him moving up to 5, and I think that would secure you there because that should get you high enough to get McCarthy if that's who you love. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else it would take to move from 11 to 5. But this is the one position you don't mess around with. If it costs if you're that committed to this guy and O'Connell says he is my guy, this is the guy we want, this is the guy I want to have in my system, then you got to make it work. You got to figure out a way to be aggressive and get it done.
Giants pick at 6, and then of course
Yeah.
they just gave Daniel Jones a bunch of
Yeah.
money, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't take someone, because I'm sure at some
Yeah.
point the guaranteed stuff goes away and they can get out from underneath that and just say, hey, that didn't work, we got to restart. Titans are
Yeah.
at 7. They just drafted Will Levis, but that was what, he was a
Probably
second or a
not.
third round pick. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're set. Bears at 9 will have taken a quarterback
Yeah.
already, so they don't need it. Jets at 10, you could see the Jets at 10 because they only got another year of Rodgers. So there's
Yeah.
some quarterback needy teams between 3 and 11. And you're right, to feel safe, you'd probably have to get up to at least number 5 if you were worried that someone else was going to go after JJ McCarthy. Now, in a real world, like where there's not all this need, like McCarthy's probably a mid-first round pick, but quarterbacks,
Yeah.
sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you feel like he's, we're, at middle of the round, first round, but you have a desperate need. And again, we all, us armchair evaluators think we, know who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, who's
Right.
going to shine. The guys who are experts flop at this all the time because it's so hard to figure out how college quarterbacks and the offenses that they run are going to translate to the NFL game, because sometimes it feels like it's apples and oranges what they're asked to do.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I think you leave it up to the coaches, particularly in this thing, O'Connell in this situation. He knows what he's looking for. He knows what he wants and what's going to work. And that's why I would trust his judgment on this more than, because, they're going to do exhaustive research on these guys, and people are still going to fail. They're going to get it wrong. And so, but if he feels adamant and confident in what, his evaluation, then I think you do whatever it takes to go get that guy.
Do you think it's possible they love someone outside the top 4? Someone like Penix, someone like
Penix.
Bo Nix, someone who's not being talked about. I mean, it's less of a sure thing, and they need to get this right now.
Yeah.
But if they feel a certain way, like everyone is saying, Penix threw the ball better than anybody at the combine. Everybody kept saying that. Like, as far as just pure arm talent, pure the way the ball looks coming out of his hand, Penix was the guy.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at Penix's deep ball numbers this year, I mean, his accuracy was crazy. His age does not scare me. I know people have talked about that. I don't care about the age.
Scare me. Yeah.
Now, the injury history with the knees,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
a concern.
Right.
And then you also have to, just go through and really break it down. It's like what Washington asked him to do. Is it transferable? Like, are the things that you're seeing, will that fit into what you're going to ask him to do in your system? And that's where the evaluation comes. And that's, higher level than I can obviously speak to for what they're looking for. But the Penix would be the one, but maybe, if they would say, could you get him in the second round?
Probably, but you can't.
But
You
you
got to
can't,
be sure. Like
if you fall in love, then you can't assume. You can't assume someone
and
else doesn't fall in love with them. That's the whole game here.
and at this point, you've put yourself in a spot where you have to
Get it
your
right.
guy. Like
You
you've got
have
to
to.
get your quarterback of the future, right? Like you don't. I don't think they love the 2025 quarterbacks they've signed.
No.
Sam Darnold to a 1-year, $10 million contract, and I'm sure they're, that's fine. I think they feel like they can probably work with him and get him to a different level that he's been at,
Yep.
and he kind of had a year to just sit and mostly watch in San Francisco and probably picked up some good habits, things like that. But like
It's a 1-year deal.
the thing they could have done if they had gotten Cousins on their terms, there was less pressure to pick a guy in the top 5. You could have
Sure.
said, okay, we've got Cousins for 1 or 2 years. Let's draft a guy. Let's not force it. But if a guy comes to us, then yes, then maybe this is our guy. Now they're definitely locked in on a quarterback, and that's dangerous because the last time they absolutely needed to have a quarterback in the first round, Chip, they got Christian Ponder.
I know. Well, and the thing is, you, under that scenario, if you have Cousins back, I don't think you're picking 11 again.
Well, that's true. That's the thing. You're not going to have a pick that high again.
No. And so this is your shot to do it. And obviously, with Cousins not being here, and you just have a 1-year bridge guy, this is your chance to go do it. And this is a deep quarterback class. I mean, it's
what if they can't get up there though? What if 1 through 3 goes how we expect, and Denver outbids them to get to number 5 and takes McCarthy? What then?
Well, then you better love the number 5 guy. Better be Penix or that's why you're going to have to be really aggressive to make sure.
That's the pressure on Kwesi and the pressure on O'Connell. I mean, if and when Kwesi delivers the guy, then the pressure becomes on O'Connell to have him become that player. But until then, last thing, and then we'll go. What do you think Justin Jefferson thinks of all this?
Well, I know there's that conversation. I mean, he's been outspoken. He loves Kirk and all that.
Yeah.
But if you go to Justin and say, we're going to make you the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, he's not going to say, well, Kirk Cousins does not throw me the ball. Sorry. Right. I mean, it's just that's not how it works. I mean, yeah, would he rather have Kirk Cousins throwing the ball than Sam Darnold? Of course. But he's not going to walk away from a historic contract. Right. It's just I don't see that happening. They can obviously,
and the fact of the matter is they control him for 3 more years, even if he doesn't. They could, got the 5th year option and franchise tags.
Franchise, exactly. So, he may be a little disappointed that he can't play with Kirk anymore. But if somebody pays him, if the Vikings pay him $33 million, what do you think the average value of that contract is going to be? Well, Tyreek Hill's $30 million. And, there's been talk about he wants to be the highest non-paid player. What's Bosa at $34 million per year?
Yeah, he wants probably 35, which is a lot.
So, I think I would live with who's their quarterback if you pay me $35 million a year. And
I don't think this jump starts any kind of dissent or any kind of trade speculation like that. It's just interesting. Like the biggest asset you have outside of your number 11 pick is that receiver as opposed to future picks.
And the other thing is too, you talk about if they bring a rookie quarterback in here. I mean, think about it. You're going to surround that quarterback with Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson, and now Aaron Jones, a couple good tackles.
Yeah, it's going to be a good offense. It should still be a good offense next year for whoever's.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, just with the skilled people and what the infrastructure and people that you're surrounding them by, and you have a head coach who's a play caller who's got a good handle on that. So I wouldn't worry about any talk of Jefferson wanting to force his way out. I just don't.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Well, I'm way more excited about 24 than I would have been had this shaken out differently. I'll tell you that much. It was time. Whatever you think of Kirk Cousins, he had good years here. He's a good quarterback. He's an above average quarterback. It was just time, and Atlanta made it easy on him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think there's no guarantees this is going to lead to what you hope that.
Of course not.
But it also, I don't think continue to run it back and be stuck in this middle where they're at right now. Eventually, you've got to try something new. And 6 years, they had 6 years, one playoff win. I think it was time to go down a different path.
100%. You lowered your floor, but you raised your ceiling eventually. And if the goal is to win championships, not just maybe win 9 or 10 games every year, this was the way they had to go. Chip, appreciate it as always. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother. We'll see you.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Always good talking to Chip. It's kind of funny. Usually when I have Chip on, we talk about 3 or 4 different subjects. Today, all Vikings, of course. That is where a lot of people's heads are at right now. And that brings us to another important piece of news. Danielle Hunter, not a surprise that he's leaving the Vikings, especially after they signed Jonathan Grenard a couple days ago on the first day of free agency. But Hunter and Grenard essentially swapping teams. Hunter going to Houston, getting a 2-year deal, almost entirely guaranteed, $48 million guaranteed to go to the Texans. They're going to miss him, but I think they've done enough, at least in the early parts of free agency, to make you think, okay, they're taking this seriously. They're not just relying on who they might be able to draft or players they've already developed. They're going to be okay when it comes to rushing the passer with some of the things they've already done in free agency. Still, Danielle Hunter is an elite player. If he started free agency thinking Cousins was maybe closer to a coin flip as to whether he was going to stay here, I think Hunter was more of a foregone conclusion that he was going to leave. Still, that will leave a mark on this team. He was an excellent player for a lot of years, and he will be missed. Let us finish with the cooler. Coworker of mine, Vince Tuss, reminds me that today is the 15th anniversary of the Syracuse 6-overtime Big East quarterfinal win over UConn. Now, the game started on March 12th, 2009, ended on March 13th, 1:22 a.m. local time, 6 overtimes. The game is great enough in and of itself, but it became part of Minnesota sports history. Why? Because that was the game that we do believe David Kahn and the Timberwolves fell in love with Jonny Flynn, the Syracuse point guard, who, by the way, I think he shot like 9 of 24 in that game. I was looking at the box score. He filled up the box score with a lot of different things in that game. Most of them good, but not all of them good. Yeah, 9 of 24 in that game, 11 assists, 6 steals, 3 rebounds. He played 67 minutes in that game, so he was certainly a warrior. Did have 7 turnovers in that game, but I guess that's to be expected if you're playing 67 minutes. But 9 of 24, made all of his free throws. Syracuse prevailed 127-117 in overtime. That led them to fall in love with Jonny Flynn. The Wolves take Ricky Rubio, number 5 in the 2009 draft. Take Jonny Flynn, number 6 in the 2009 draft. Steph Curry goes to the Golden State Warriors, number 7 in the 2009 draft. Thank or blame, however you want to place it, that game, that was a big factor, maybe a tiebreaker of sorts in how the Wolves drafted that year. And yeah, it's revisionist history, I know. Was Steph Curry ever really going to come here? I don't know. He probably didn't want to play for the Wolves, things like that. But fact of the matter is they had a chance to draft Steph Curry, and they didn't. And Jonny Flynn's 6 overtime heroics 15 years ago played a role in that decision. So thanks to Vince for that trip down memory lane, as painful as it might be. That'll do it for today. Thanks so much for joining me. Back at it again on Thursday. I think we're going to talk name, image, and likeness on Thursday with Jeff Day from the Star Tribune and Gavin Dorsey, our intern at the Star Tribune right now. Really interesting conversation I had with them this week that I've been kind of hanging on to. I think I'll use that on Thursday's show unless something dramatic happens, and you never know right now with free agency and everything else going on. But that is the plan for Thursday. Until then, I am Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.